can we expect water in affected areas to be restored? For more on this, we are joined by the Water Department Spokesperson, Sputnik Ratau. Thank you so much for your time, Sputnik. We do appreciate it. I must say that this is very concerning, especially because we did try and get Rand Water on to explain what is actually going on and an update for the week ahead, but we were told that they are unavailable, which I find rather shocking given the state of what's happening in Johannesburg as well as Tshwane. You, as the spokesperson of the National Water Department, what can you tell us?
Well, Heidi, thank you very much for tonight. Yes, it is true that we have had very difficult situations over the last few weeks, mainly because obviously, remember that we, as the sector, we are not, set apart when we have outages of energy and so on. And with the kind of infrastructure that water actually utilizes, it is very difficult to immediately have a direct response when the energy comes back. We actually need a couple of hours, sometimes days, to recharge the reservoirs and so on. But that being the case, I must indicate that at the moment, even as you referred to Rand Water, that Rand Water is now at full operation. In fact, what is true as well is that even over time, Rand Water has, in the first place, been over-abstracting beyond what the water use license has actually allowed them, such that we have been in contact with them and are in discussions that they need to reduce their abstraction levels to a level where we can then look at how we can look at new levels for their water use license. But that is also impacted by the fact that there is a demand, much higher demand from the municipalities than what Rand Water is actually allowed to pump, and that in itself is a big issue. One of the major issues that can be able to take us out of this, even without the electricity outages, is the need for operations and maintenance in municipalities. The water losses within municipalities in Gauteng, for instance, range at an average of about 40%. And that's a huge amount of potable water that could, in essence, be able to be delivered and be in reserve in cases where there is even an outage, even for a day or so that they can be able to be those reticulation processes continuing. So that in itself is one a place where we can make a huge amount of a win if municipalities can be able to, fix those leaks to the point where we are able to reduce those leaks to even below 20%. That could make a huge impact. But the huge demand, because of firstly the heat wave, it is a reality. There is a lot of evaporation that is happening. There is a lot of water that is wasted on watering the lawns when it is just going to evaporate during the course of the day. Watering cleaning your driveways, as well as the cars with hose pipes does not help because it exacerbates the demand. And that is just on the domestic use, by the way. We haven't even talked about the industrial demand and so on.
Certainly. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm glad that we've got you on the show and you've agreed to engage with us, because Rand Water told us earlier this week and soon after has just not been willing to engage with us and explain to us what's going on, that it's got to do with the heat wave. And they didn't attribute this crisis to a maintenance issue or a leak issue, but rather that residents are not using water sparingly, and because of the heat wave, it's just exacerbating the situation. They slightly attributed it to the load shedding and how it's not helping the situation. But I want to ask you, Sputnik, and I want you to be frank with us. This leak issue has not been something new. It's not something that just developed in the last week or so. It's clearly something that's been happening for some time. And I wonder why maintenance has not been prioritized to make sure that people still have water. And I refer to the issue of the necessity of water, especially in the context of hospitals, especially two major hospitals in Johannesburg, where they see thousands of patients are having to clean feces off the floor because there's no water?
Heidi, from our point of view, the issue of the repair of leaks is actually top of the table. And I must say this because even in the engagements that the ministry had across the provinces, meeting with all the water service authorities, meeting with all the municipalities, meeting with all the provinces, the issue of maintenance is one of the things that has been seen to be really an Achilles heel within the sector. Even when you look at places where there has been huge amounts of demand, such that there is almost a sense of the drying of the taps. When you look at the example of Gqeberha, when Minister went there and said to the municipality, reduce your leakages from your 5,000 plus and bring them down in the shortest possible time, the amount of water that was saved in that time was so that it was able to assist in being able to even reduce the possibility of the drying of the taps. The issue of operations and maintenance has also been part of the discussions and engagements with COGTA, with SALGA, and with all the water service authorities, as I said, that unless that happens, we will continue to have this difficulty of insufficient water, even though the reservoirs might have sufficient. The issue is that if you are not able to take that water to the end user because of the loss along the line in your reticulation system, you are not going to win this war in any particular time. From the point of view of the Department of Water and Sanitation, that is one thing that is very much top of mind, and the engagements that we continue to have with municipalities include that as a first part of what we need to look at in order to be able to reduce demand. And demand is such that also it is correct that when Rand Water said the overuse does not help, it is true that if we are going to overuse, if we are going to put a strain on the reservoirs within municipalities, and ultimately it doesn't matter how much Rand Water can pump, it means the demand will always go higher instead of reducing. And in a country that is that continues to have to receive less than world average rainfall, that is one thing we cannot afford.
Yes, I hear you, and I understand that as residents and as citizens, we should also take on the responsibility to use water sparingly. But the issue stems from the fact that residents are saying they've been without water for some time, and they are being blamed. For example, in areas such as Crosby and in the areas where Rahima Musa and Helen Joseph are, they are being blamed for the water restrictions, yet there's constant leaks and constant issues. You keep referring to how serious the issue is around the leaks, and I want to ask you if you can maybe quantify how much water is actually being lost because of these leaks.
At the last count, Heidi, in terms of your percentage of water leaks that is being lost, or rather water that is being lost through leaks, as a country, we were in the region of about 43-45%, which is almost half of the clean water that we should not be losing. And world average on leaks is at about 10%. Not that there will not be leaks, but there will always be leaks. And remember that these leaks are not necessarily only in the domestic area. That's something that we also need maybe to just address very quickly, that it is not just in the industrial area. We have huge overuse in the industries. That is why we have said, even in agriculture, you have to look at new technologies which are there. And some of the agriculture role players have begun to use those that are allowing them to continue to irrigate, but irrigate in such a manner that it is not at a rate that implies that so much more water is actually being used. It is also about timing, because if you're going to irrigate during the course of the day when the temperature is at about 35, 36 degrees, you're going to lose most of that water to evaporation. So it is also about when you actually irrigate. When you look at the losses in the industries, the question is how much of that water can actually be reused and recycled in order to be able to to even be treated to industrial use, so that industries do not have to use potable water in their normal operations. And that has been seen to be something that can happen. You have had in mining operations, some of the mines that are reusing and recycling the water that normally would have been effluent and being discharged into the environment. So all of those things put together can be able to assist us as a country and even as a province. Remember that even the overpopulation of Gauteng in itself implies that the huge demand on water in the province is going to be impacting on the performance of infrastructure in itself. Not that you are blaming people for going to areas where there's a perception of better opportunities, but it is a reality that we have to deal with when we look at the numbers, and you have to look at the infrastructure that is in place to be able to serve those very people.
Sure, I hear what you're saying, Sputnik, but I'm very alarmed by the fact that you're saying about 40% of the water is being lost because of the leaks. And I want us to bring up a graphic that we've compiled, that we've actually taken off Rand Water's website, that shows how full our dams actually are. So as residents, when they see this and they see that the dam status and total storage capacity in the integrated Vaal River system is at 93.8%, and most dams are over 90%, with just a few being over 80%. You look at this graphic and you say to yourself, but why don't I have water? How are you going to solve the issue of leaks? Because if you're telling me that 40% of our water is being lost because of leaks and a lack of maintenance repair, you know, you're looking at the water departments and saying, but what are you doing? Isn't it your job to sort this out and fix this? Because this is a crisis.
Heidi, one of the decisions that came out of the water and sanitation summit that was held in February was that the issue of the leaks must be top of the table. And those leaks, when you look at where they are occurring in the reticulation systems. The reticulation systems remain in the hands of municipalities. That is why it is important that in the cooperation between the DWS, COPTA, SALGA, with the assistance of MISA as the entity of COPTA that is looking at infrastructure within municipalities, that kind of fixation has got to happen and is happening. And that is why I made the example that where there is a perfect intent and actually attention given to reducing the leaks, the amount of water that can be saved, and that has been proven to be saved, has gone on to be able to assist in availing that water and making sure that in the long term, you actually have infrastructure that is optimally operating until while you are still looking at other means of new infrastructure development, because it is more important to actually make sure that you have operations and maintenance on the current infrastructure in the meantime, so that you do not have to put pressure on yourself while you are doing the long-term development of new infrastructure. So that is something that has got to happen. We are supporting the municipalities, by the way, Heidi, in a number of ways. One is that we do have grants that go to municipalities so that they can be able to look at that very portion of their responsibilities. We do avail from them from time to time, depending on each case, capacity even of our own employees who are deployed for a time to assist those. But remember that we cannot deploy them there forever. And the issue is that we always encouraging municipalities to actually employ people who are adequately trained and qualified to be able to do their operations and maintenance, because that is exactly where you get the fallout. So there is a lot that is happening. We're hoping that we can be able to achieve this. But just to go back to the issue of the dams that are full, the dams in the integrated Vaal River system, yes, are in a very much better way than we have seen in a very long time. But remember that why we have dams is not necessarily that we must drain those dams so that we put that water into the system. We can only afford to have so much water in the system, depending on what is available in terms of infrastructure, but also as per demand. Remember that dams in themselves are constructed to be able to assist the country to make sure that in times of difficulties, then you are able to have reserve that you can bring into the system. If you remember in 2016, when the integrated Vaal River system was going very low, and actually the Vaal Dam, where rainwater abstracts water for treatment, was going below 25%, we actually had to go to Sterkfontein and release water from that reserve dam to be able to assist. So you're not building dams in order to drain them to bring into your system at the moment, but you're looking more to have water in storage in reserve for those times when there is difficulty in terms of rains. You know that climate change is upon us. You know that we are continuing to see less and less rainfall. We are already in October now. We have not seen the summer rains coming. We know that coming out of the winter, the winter rainfall season in the Western Cape did not, was not very healthy. And that is why we are seeing even the Theewaterskloof within the Western Cape water supply system being in a difficult situation. So we've got to look at the context in its entirety and not just the one part.
Sure. I've run out of time, Sputnik, but I just want to ask you what is being done and if there is if the hospitals that are really battling with no water are top of the list. And I ask you this in the context of the fact that Helen Joseph and Rahima Musa have really been struggling, and this is not something new because of the water restrictions and the conversation we're having now about preserving water and making sure that residents don't use water recklessly. But what is being done about these hospitals? This is disgraceful. I fail to understand why hospitals should struggle with water when this is needed. Doctors are getting sick because of the lack of water at these two hospitals.
Heidi, I think the issue of the health infrastructure is something that is quite an issue of concern for government generally. And if you can remember, about 2 weeks or so ago, the Minister of Health had made an undertaking that he's going to be looking into this issue even of what happens when there is no generation of electricity such that it impacts on other things, including, by the way, operations like having water. So that kind of discussion is being had. I think in terms of where we are, rainwater is pumping full time now. Since yesterday, actually, we should see those reservoirs recovered probably by tomorrow or so. And I think Joburg Water would be best placed to be able to inform exactly what the status of those reservoirs are, including what the implications would be for the hospitals. But the hospitals, just like every other thing, but maybe even more important, are being looked at very critically. And I would really believe that there's going to be efforts to make sure that a repeat of such does not happen. I remember that during the course of these difficulties over the last few weeks, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be corrected, there was a decision from Joburg Water to say they are going to be looking at the hospitals themselves, just to make sure that they do not get into the situation which is being spoken about now. Personally, I do not have that first-hand information, so it would be very difficult for me to say exactly where things are in that regard. But hospitals are top of the list, I can bet you now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time this evening. We do appreciate it. That was Water Department Spokesperson Sputnik Ratau.